Aye.
Vento,
Here. Present.
Wolf,
Here.
Zarin,
Present.
and Lindstrom.
Here.
Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. And first item on our agenda, as always, is the approval of our agenda. Is there a motion and second to approve the agenda?
Wolf moves approval.
Vento seconds.
Vento does, I guess.
I heard Vento on the second on that one. So let's go with the roll call on that one.
Awesome. Fredson,
Aye.
Turner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye. Thank you. And next up, we have our minutes from our June 9th Environment Committee meeting. Is there a motion and second for that?
Turner motion.
Approval.
I heard, Wendy, would you like to second that motion?
Sure.
Wonderful. A roll call, please.
Fredson,
Aye.
Turner,
Aye.
Vento,
Aye.
Wolf,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye. Thank you. And that takes us to our one and only non-consent item for this afternoon, which is an agreement with the city of Minneapolis for our big project in that neck of the woods. Mr. Bemis, welcome.
Mr. Chair, committee members, good afternoon. My name is Chris Remus, and I'm the Assistant Manager in Interceptor Engineering. And today I'd like to bring before you for consideration the intergovernmental agreement with the City of Minneapolis. Next slide, please. So a little project background. The line shown in orange is the last segment for the improvements of the Hopkins Force Main. 2,700 lineal feet of dual force main that'll be installed with this project. And when we started this, the city of Minneapolis had asked to enter into a cooperative agreement with the Met Council, as they had been doing a flood study and they experienced flooding issues on Humboldt in the area shown as blue. So they had an interest to improve their storm sewer system by upgrading their size to a 48-inch pipe in that area. So they expressed interest to have us construct that with our project. Next slide, please. So the terms of agreement are listed below. The Met Council would be the lead agency on this project. The city of Minneapolis is permitting our general contractor, whoever that is awarded to install the city utilities, being the storm sewer here, and perform the restoration work. Preliminary cost participation, right now we're estimating the city's portion of that work to be around $800,000, and that'll be finalized as we continue through the final design documents. And the city will pay the council an additional 7% of the city improvement value for engineering, inspection, and construction oversight as part of that work. Next slide, please. So the proposed action I'm requesting is that the Met Council authorize its regional administrator to negotiate and execute an intergovernmental agreement with the city of Minneapolis for the construction of storm sewer improvements as part of the MCES East Isles Force Main Replacement Project. And next slide, please. And with that, I can stand for any questions.
Thank you. I have one. This is pretty standard when there is a project of this type, when there's a city aspect to one of our projects. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, yes, in this case, it was an opportunity for the city to improve the flooding issue that they had in the neighborhood. And it also, minimizes the disruption to the residents and the park users that one entity is in there and completes all the work at one time, as opposed to multiple disruptions.
Very good. Councilmember Zirin.
I would like, Mr. Chair, I would like to ask a question. So this is the Met Council doing the procurement on this, correct?
Mr. Chair, committee member, yes, that is correct. The Met Council would advertise this project, and procurement would also assist in completion of the cooperative agreement documents.
Okay, so we're not at that point yet where we're going to let this out for bid, and we don't know any DBE or MCUB sort of stuff along with that. We just want to get this agreement done right now. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair, committee members, that is correct. We anticipate advertising this in roughly December of this year, call it winter of 2020. So those elements will be determined as we get closer to that point.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Other questions for Mr. Rivas? Seeing none, do we have a motion?
Fredson will move approval.
And a second?
Zirin seconds.
Call the roll, please. Thank you.
Yes. Fredson,
Aye.
Sterner,
Aye.
Bento. You have to take yourself off mute.
Aye.
Thank you. Wolf,
Aye.
Zarin,
Aye.
Lindstrom.
Aye.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. It is approved.
Thank you.
Thank you. And that takes us to our information item this afternoon, which relates to odor control. Very important topic in our business. And we have Mr. Schwartz and Ms. Wolfert are going to be presenting.
Good afternoon, Chair Lindstrom and members of the council. My name is Jeff Schwartz. I'm the Minneapolis area manager for environmental services, and I'm joined by Lisa Wolfert. She's a principal environmental scientist from process engineering. The purpose of this presentation is to introduce the odor management team that we're both a part of to the Environment Committee and provide a brief summary of activities the odor management team has completed, has in progress, and has planned. Next slide, please. The odor management team was chartered by ESET in the fall of 2018 to develop new resources and procedures to improve our customer level of service in regards to odors. The main customer service goal is to be a good neighbor, which includes minimizing impacts of environmental services facilities on communities, providing consistent odor management performance, and responding to reports of odors in a timely manner. This requires communication with our customer communities, consistent odor management performance, improvement in odor complaint response procedures, and staff education on odor-related issues within our system. The odor management team includes members from support services, maintenance, technical services, and operations. Next slide, please. We use many different technologies for odor management throughout our system, including carbon, biofilters, bioxide, chemical scrubbers, and biotrickling filters. The odor control technology is selected based on a variety of site-specific conditions, including location, odor source and strength, volume of flow, force main versus gravity flow, and location. Next slide, please.
Chair Lindstrom and members of the committee, that previous slide's list of odor control equipment represents a significant investment in minimizing the impact of our facilities in the communities we serve. So we want to ensure that that equipment is working as intended. To do this, we conduct a routine monitoring program whereby we regularly evaluate the odor removal performance of our odor control units using a couple of different approaches. One approach is to use analytical equipment to identify and quantify specific odorous compounds. But there's a limitation with that approach in that those results can't tell us how an identified compound is impacting a community. The other limitation with this approach is that the average human nose can detect odorous compounds for which we are testing at levels much lower than the analyzers can detect. So in theory, we can experience a situation where the analyzers show no measurable compounds, but we still have an odor problem. So to counter the analytical limitations, we use an additional approach called odor panel evaluation, where we use panels of people to evaluate air samples from our OCUs or from our odor control units. This testing is done at our odor lab in St. Paul using an instrument called an olfactometer you see pictured on the left. The olfactometer simply simulates what happens to an odor in ambient air or how it dilutes down. The panelists are also asked to describe any odor they smell, which we can then use to compare with any of the measurable odorants we may have or that may have been identified by the analyzers. To provide consistent odor management performance, we've developed internal criteria defining what constitutes acceptable performance. As shown in the picture on the right in this slide, this is just a page from our monthly report. And it is just a simple rating system of green, yellow, and red to provide an overview of how a unit is performing during its last test and where problems might be developing or are occurring. And we can respond in a team-wide effort to address any corrective action needed. Next slide, please.
At the end of 2018, the odor management team interviewed MCS personnel most familiar with operating and maintaining odor control equipment, odor complaints, and areas of the system that were consistent pain points. A list of pain points was developed and prioritized, and funding from a variety of sources was made available to do small-scale construction projects to mitigate the pain points, including rehabilitation of over a dozen maintenance hole covers and access hatches that were sources of fugitive emissions, changing out biofilter media, and miscellaneous improvements at existing odor management facilities. Larger scale projects included installation of a biotrickling filter at Metro, which is shown on the left of the slide, installation of carbon systems at Blue Lake, and chemical scrubber rehabilitation at Seneca. The slide on the right-hand side is in front of Concordia University. It used to be a snow chute where in the old days they would plow snow into our interceptor. That shaft is about 10 feet in diameter and 100 feet deep, and had hatches on it that leaked there for quite a while, and we fixed that for them last year. Next slide, please.
So despite our best prevention efforts, odorous emissions can still occur, and they can cause people to report odor incidents, residents and municipalities both. So the odor management team has been streamlining our response to these reports through a collaborative effort to identify and resolve MCES odor issues. Our odor investigation efforts can include the use of a field olfactometer to quantify ambient odor, as you can see in the left picture. This device is more commonly known as a nasal ranger, and the operating principle is the same as the lab olfactometer that we use. Now, because hydrogen sulfide is the predominant odorant present in wastewater, it's often the culprit in our odor issues. As a result, any site investigations are going to include the use of a hydrogen sulfide analyzer to collect either spot check measurements or to log longer term measurements, depending on what the situation calls for. The picture on the right shows a data logging hydrogen sulfide monitor and a data logging pressure monitor, and they're being placed in a sewer maintenance hole. These typically are left in place for multiple days to determine how much hydrogen sulfide is present at a location and whether that hydrogen sulfide is remaining in the sewer or escaping from it. And the investigation data from all of these efforts is the data generated, I should say, is used in determining short-term and long-term options to correct any odor problems. Next slide, please.
Using the data collected during the odor report investigations and record drawings of existing facilities, facilities are modeled to identify plume configurations, airflows through gravity sewers, and the effects of changing operations of existing odor control equipment on the facilities. This slide shows how odor and pressure levels in Minneapolis interceptors change with changes of fan speed and flow levels in the interceptors at our West Meters odor management facility. Next slide, please.
So if you recall the second slide listing the odor control technology that we use, you recall it listed 39 carbon units in use in our service area. And unfortunately, we can't simply use the same type of carbon in all of these units because some of them have greater odor challenges than others. And there are a variety of carbon products available on the market that claim to meet any challenges that a wastewater utility has, but it isn't feasible for us to try these products in the full-scale carbon units. So as a result, our internal R&D, research and development, air quality, and process engineering staffs collaborated on a research project that you see pictured here. We developed a device that allows us to evaluate up to 6 different media types at a time on a much smaller scale than a large odor control unit. This device is currently installed on site at one of our odor control facilities in the collection system, and it's pulling a slipstream of odorous air that you see from that duct in the background. And we have 3 vendor supplied sample medias that are running in stages in this device. And we've been conducting full scale odor removal evaluations and monitoring the same effort that we do on our full scale odor control units, and anticipate that the results are going to translate to other locations in our collection system where we have odor control units that experience similar odorous loads as this location does. We also have an additional smaller unit in development, which will fit into tighter spaces, and it's more easily moved than this unit, but it can also be used in conjunction with this unit to provide greater testing coverage. Next slide, please. So our future activities for the odor management team include continuing efforts to refine how the public reports odor incidents to us and our tracking process for those odor reports. It also includes streamlining our process for reporting odor testing results and the development of an internal odor dashboard and repository to replace that monthly odor control testing report.
Facility and operation enhancements will include continued field monitoring, airflow modeling, and working with facility managers to optimize equipment performance and minimize odors. Design standards will be developed for use by our internal engineering groups and outside consultants to ensure new systems planned for future construction take into account existing field conditions and the lessons learned from operating other sites. Finally, the odor management team will keep up on emerging technologies by attending biennial conferences sponsored by the Water Environment Federation and facilitating odor management webinars to keep engineers, operators, and other MCS personnel informed about our mission. Next slide, please. I would like to thank the chair and the committee for your time and open the floor to questions.
Thank you. Outstanding presentation. Councilmember Zirin.
Mr. Chair, I'm really interested in finding out how you get volunteers to be odor panelists.
Mr. Chair and committee members, we actually have a contract with a private odor lab, St. Croix Sensory, located in Stillwater, Minnesota. And we contract with them to provide us with certified and trained odor panelists on a schedule that we request.
Well, that's good to know. It's not exactly like sampling ice cream here.
I was thinking wine, but I would go with ice cream as well. That's great question. Others?
Mr. Chair, this is Councilmember Vento. I have a quirky question, and I read through the material over the weekend, and maybe it's in there, but I'm wondering, are there state statutes that limit odor, or have guidelines for odor control?
Mr. Chair and committee members, there is a state standard that exists for hydrogen sulfide specifically, but there is no longer any odor rule on the books in the state of Minnesota. So the PCA they handle some odor complaints, but it is primarily directed to the counties and local units of government.
That was my understanding as well. But so there's still, like you just stated, there still may be some city ordinances on the books that we need to pay attention to. Is that correct?
Mr. Chair and committee members, that is correct. There are a number of communities that have developed their own ordinances. Minneapolis and Cottage Grove come to mind, both having dealt with some industries, and certainly Cottage Grove and South St. Paul have issues still remaining from the stockyards. So yes, and we are aware of those and try to keep on top of any new ordinances that come onto the books and work with those communities to meet those ordinances.
Shifting gears just a little bit, what is the process for the public to report any issues?
I'm sorry, you cut out just a bit there.
Sorry about that. For the public that would like to report an issue, what is the best way for the public to do that?
I'll let Jeff handle that question.
We've got a number on our website for the on our metrocouncil.org site that gives a phone number to our dispatch unit at regional maintenance. And regional maintenance has a list of questions that they ask people when they get a phone call in to help us to investigate the complaint in the future. We also are trying to work with cities to call us when they get complaints from their residents, because a lot of times residents don't really know that MCS exists a lot of times, but they do know who they can contact at their city, and there are ways for the city to contact us. And another thing that we would like them to call the cities first is because a lot of times odors aren't related to sewers, or they're related to problems with the interior of their houses. There might be a trap that's not full of water, or they might have cracks in their vent piping. And those are the things that we would like the city to be informed of and to investigate before they even come to us. Our problems are usually in our larger interceptors, and we're not everywhere. It seems like we are, but we're not the source of everything. So we're trying to work with the cities to do that. And we've developed a communications plan that we'll be working on too as part of the odor management team.
That makes a lot of sense. Last question from me. If I recall correctly, last year there was a fire at St. Croix Valley in the odor control building. I know we took some action on that last fall. I assume that's been resolved, or is that correct?
Mr. Chair and committee members, I can give you an update I received today in that all three of those odor control units are back online or have been rehabbed. And I know at least two of those, they typically run 2 of 3 at one time. And 2 of those are back online. They have carbon in them and are undergoing performance testing this week and next.
Excellent. Thank you. And I understand there is a question from Councilmember Sterner and Councilmember Wolf. Let's start with Sterner. Councilmember Sterner.
All right, thank you, Chair Lindstrom. I just was wondering on lift station 74, just getting more specific information on the April red tag, so to speak, on the odor, what the circumstances were on that one and the solutions that were solved on that.
So, Mr. Chair and committee members, and Jeff can add his 2 cents worth on this as well. Testing did show that that unit was in need of a carbon change to it. It has since been changed, and we are adjusting our testing schedule. We've had some challenges with the COVID-19 issues, accessing sites and who should be in the field and encountering other workers. So that unit has been changed, and from my group is scheduled to undergo testing next week. And Jeff, if you have further input on that.
Mr. Chair and committee members, yes, when we got the call that there were orders down there, myself and another member of the air quality team went down and looked at the site and walked the force mains in the general area, mainly to see if there was anything else that could be a problem down there. So not finding anything, we did find the same thing that Lisa did, and basically we were getting orders coming out of the carbon vessel because the carbon media was spent. As part of the order management team, we've also worked to get a procurement contract worked out. So when we have breakthroughs and we need to purchase media, we have 2 vendors that we can go to now for this year to purchase appropriate media. And that went very smoothly, actually.
Thank you. Councilmember Wolf.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I don't have any questions. I just forgot to lower my hand from when we were practicing before the meeting.
Oh, very good. All right. Anything else from the council? I'm not sure I can see all of you. So if you have any other questions or comments, now would be the time. Excellent presentation, both of you. This is obviously incredibly critical component to the entire MCES, and so keep up the good work.
Thank you.
Mr. Chair, committee members, thank you.
Thank you. And that takes us to the general manager's report. Lisa.
Mr. Chair and council members, today I thought it would be a good time to do a little more in-depth update on the pandemic response that we've had in place here now for months. I think you know that Mary Bogey is the incident commander for the Met Council Incident Command. And within ES, we have an incident command as well. And our incident commander is Larry Rogacki. And so Larry is going to start us off with some background information, and we have another staff member here that's going to present as well. So I'll start it off with Larry.
Thank you, Lisa. Jason, next slide, please. So this is a great day. Today, I wanted to share with you the things that we've learned over the first 100 days of us operating under this pandemic and the way we've changed our business practices. And I will be joined by Kate Nyquist, who's an outreach coordinator and has done some spectacular work for us on helping bring people together through this incident. So Jason, next slide, please. Good, so let's start with some just facts and figures. How are things working with MCES through this pandemic. So MCES, as well as the council, initiated our incident command system on March 16th. Today is exactly 100 days from then. And through that time, MCES has done spectacularly well. We were very nervous going into this because there's so many uncertainties. And when we started, we said, we have 3 goals that we need to keep in mind. We need to prevent the spread of COVID-19 in our workplace. We need to reduce the risk of disruption to our essential services. The water's going to flow, whether we have staff or whether we're ill or not. And the third is we need to support the well-being of our employees. So over these 100 days, I am very proud and pleased to report we have had no compliance issues. We have had no significant staffing shortages. And believe me, I was very nervous going into this, but we've done really well. And we've actually seen a small reduction in safety incidents, about a 10 or a 15% reduction compared to previous years. I was worried with less people or things being different, we might see more safety incidents, and exactly the opposite is true. So over these past 100 days, 3 months, 14 weeks, 2 days, MCES, we've had 3 employees that have confirmed COVID positive test results. 2 are our employees and 1 was one of our security guards. We also had 3 people that were in close contact with family members who tested positive. And that's a little harder for us because if you're in close contact with someone, say a coworker, and then you go home for 14 days, there was a very defined specific point of contact. But if it's somebody that you are living with, that close contact continues on and on and on. You could be exposed for a long period of time. And in addition to those, there are 49 employees that over these last 100 days we have been tracking because they had close contact with someone that had potentially COVID or who was ill, came down with COVID-related symptoms. And at the beginning of this, it was difficult to get testing done. So we were working in a very cautious manner and separating people and, enforcing some social distance. As we go forward, COVID testing is now much more readily available, and you can get it for a variety of reasons you are allowed to be tested. So that will help us. Because again, we have someone who gets, say, a fever, and we send them home because you don't know if they have COVID or not. There's no testing. You have to assume it could be. If we had testing, we could send them home. They could get tested. If it's not COVID, it's okay for them to come back as soon as they recover. The other thing we've done is we've recently implemented some pre-entry screening, which includes temperature monitoring of everybody entering our facilities. And that opens us the door to follow some new CDC guidelines that were set up for essential employees that lets us bring people back. We have people that went home and may have had underlying conditions. Well, this allows us to bring them back as long as we have a testing program and a program in to protect them. And, I am always worried about not having enough people on a ship. So this gives us more flexibility. So very good results. Jason, next slide, please. So, we've been reflecting on what have we learned, right? This is something different. What have we learned over 100 days? So there are several things that really kind of have stuck with us, with me. The incident command team, I guess, is the best way to say that. And it's been good for us to reflect on, but it's really going to help us for the next incident that we run across. So number 1, we rely on our on-site workers to keep both our facilities and our construction projects operating. We started to ask them to come on site and work. They were very nervous. What am I getting into? What is my exposure? What is this going to mean to me? How come I can't work at home? Well, not everybody can work. So for those on-site workers to come in every day, they needed to feel safe. They needed to feel safe in the workplace, and they needed to know that their families are protected, that we're not putting them at risk. So how do you do that? So what we did is we implemented changing business practices. We did things like staggered shifts so that everybody doesn't show up at one time and the locker room isn't full and the break room isn't full at the same time. We expanded our control rooms and connected workstations around a building. So instead of 6 people being in a control room, we had 6 spaces in different rooms so operators could be separated. With many of our staff working at home, we had extra vehicles. So we reallocated those vehicles and we put in a rule that said we only want 1 employee in a vehicle at a time. If there's a crew of 2, we drive 2 vehicles out. Because that time in the car was time at close contact. And if we could avoid that, why wouldn't we? We put in a bunch of practices and supplies for people to clean their work area, to disinfect their work area, to, again, practices, procedures, schedules, supplies, whatever they needed. And we issued some contracts with firms that would disinfect our facilities, large scale. So if someone was ill or suspected, we could bring them in and do a large disinfection. Again, if you have to report to work, that's what makes you feel comfortable. As we did that, people liked it. They said, okay, we see what you're doing, and that makes us feel good. The other thing, about 50% of our employees can work at home. So we very quickly said, if you can work at home, you must work at home. But you know what? This has been going on for 14 weeks, and it can be very isolating for people. They're used to being in an office environment. They're used to interacting with people. All of a sudden now, they're spending day after day after day by themselves. So one thing we learned is that we need to work on maintaining a team engagement, getting people to feel like they're still part of the business. So some things we did, and where, one of our managers started a virtual trivia contest at lunchtime. If you're free, spend a half an hour and we'll play a game. One of our managers did a happy hour with his team, right? At 4 o'clock, everybody gets on, brings a drink, and we just talk about anything but work. One department did introductions of their pets. Everybody came on and had a picture of their pet and they talked about it. Some of the people do virtual home tours because you're talking to people at home. So they walk around and they show what their house is like. And what all these things do, what I really liked about it, what I like about video on video conferences, you start to see people, they're coworkers, but they're also people. In some ways, it's actually, I think in some ways it's brought us closer together. Another lesson learned, we need flexible policies. Those policies were both for the work at home as well for leave. So what they did is they were able to provide our staff with a lot of flexibility, especially at the beginning when schools were being closed and students were working at home and needed, online learning and childcare options were disappearing. The last thing our staff needed was to worry about that on top of doing their job at home. So we had a lot of flexibility. They really appreciated the ability to get everything kind of set up. Now, we were fortunate when we went into this because we had 14 continuity of operation plans that we had built for our facilities over the last 4 or 5 years with the assistance of some RAIS staff. We also had a pandemic plan that we developed in 2015 for the H1N1 epidemic. And it was good that we had it, but a continuity of operation plan is designed on a building is unavailable. There's a fire, right? Something happens. There's a flood. 3 days, you can't get in there, then you build some backup. Well, we didn't really think about a long-term pandemic that would affect all of our facilities. So we had to start and we had to develop that. Now, by having a pandemic plan, by having these COOPs, we had already the basics for an incident command structure. That structure had defined roles and responsibilities. It allowed us to get started really fast. But it also aligned with other organizations' incident command structures or ES and RA's command structure. So it made it very easy for us to communicate and coordinate. If there's one lesson that I learned through this, it's how important communication is. We cannot communicate it enough, and we cannot communicate in enough different ways. Communication needs to be timely, focused, concise, and frequent. We found is as we focused on communication, getting the right message to the right employees at the right time, the employees felt much more respected and their anxieties were reduced. One thing I learned is that if you're not communicating enough, people will fill in the blanks. Maybe by rumors, maybe by assumptions, but they just want to know what's going on. Don't have to know everything. There's some health issues, or confidentiality issues. Just got to let them know that, yep, here's what's going on and we've got it under control. Then it made a huge difference once we realized that and we modified our communications. So we've had incident command meetings. That has helped. What's been really valuable in that, instead of a small team, we have an incident command structure that has a bunch of positions identified. We have a backup for each one, and we have a backup for the backup. Because let's face it, you are the incident commander, you know what's going on, and one day you get sick and you're no longer available. So other people have to be willing to step in. So by having a larger incident command, update meetings, and keeping people informed, we brought in people from all different parts of ES, and it really helped with communication and getting different perspectives. And the last thing that we learned is that for the last 4 or 5 years, we've really been advocating mobile technology and telework practices. Whether it's at work to put a tablet in the hand of someone, whether it's to allow our managers to travel wherever and be in communication. By having done that, by having made the investment, by having trained people, by having developed the opportunities, once people were said you got to work at home, it's like, yeah, okay, take a display home and you're working at home. It was easy for us. Not all the divisions had it quite so easy. Jason, next slide, please. So, lessons learned. Now let's look forward. One of the things we're finding is that there are some new ways, or maybe, once this pandemic is done, maybe there's things we want to continue. There's things that, we tried here, and all of a sudden it's like it opened up doors for us. One of the maybe unfortunate things is that everyone's waiting for the new normal or waiting for the pandemic to be over. This is day 100, but realistically, we could have day 200. We could be celebrating day 300. We have no idea. So we might be in that new normal. So what can we do, right? We got to change our mindset from just building this, how do we keep it going? So about 4 weeks ago, we implemented a mandatory social distancing and mask wearing policy at our facilities. Issued everyone 2 masks, and we said, whenever possible, work more than 6 feet from anyone else, whether that's break room, lunchroom, anything, 6 feet or more. And if you can't, you must wear a mask. And at first, there was some resistance because it's harder to breathe, it's hot, it's awkward, all those things. But once people realized they're not wearing a mask so much to protect them, they're wearing a mask to protect your coworkers. You're wearing a mask to protect your coworkers' family. And all of a sudden, once that understanding came, people were like, yeah, okay, I can do this. So, they're watching out for each other. I mean, it's really been very nice to see. So we'll keep that going. In the last 2.5 weeks ago, we implemented a pre-entry screening process. We started with the Metro plant. There's a bunch of questions that an employee has to answer, and they get their temperature scanned. And that's before you're allowed to enter the facility. And it's not only employees, it's everyone. So it doesn't matter if you're a contractor, it doesn't matter if you're a truck driver, it doesn't matter if you're the mailman. Want to go in, you have to pass the screening. And it was awkward, there's a lot of logistics, but after 2.5 weeks, we've only turned away one person. That was a contractor who had been out driving in his car on a hot day. Even though we had him wait, his temperature didn't come down, and we said, well, we can't let you in, and he said, okay. we were worried about all the people. Well, the average wait time is between 20 and 30 seconds. So it's really worked out really, really well. So we did it at Metro. This past Monday, we started it at Blue Lake and Seneca. Next week, we roll it out at Empire. And then after that, we're going to get all of our smaller facilities. So that's really good because it's preventing the spread, or it's preventing, it's preventing more exposure from people as we go forward. We have been generating a COVID newsletter. It goes to all ES employees. We started it every day, and as things have stabilized, we're now down to once a week. But the nice thing about that, everybody keeps everybody informed. Here's where we are. Here's what you need to be aware of. Here's what's coming up. Here's resources for you. It's just a nice way to kind of keep everybody in the loop. We've done a lot with video teleconferencing, similar to this meeting, and we've done it throughout environmental services. As people have gotten familiar, we've been able to expand that. There's chats, there's messaging, there's phone calls, there's something called whiteboards, there's video streaming. We're starting to use all that stuff. And we started this because of the work at home employees, but now we're really finding the value to even the on-site employees. It's been a great way for us to reach out to people, again, across all of our facilities, all the shifts. One example of that is we held some town halls. We've held 10 of them so far. So what this is, it's just a good way to reach out to a group of people and ask questions, or have them ask questions. So we did 2 of them that were to all ES employees, and on both of them had over 200 people participate. So it was a really good way to get a consistent message to a lot of people. But in some ways it was too big. It was intimidating. We had an operator come to us and said, it might be good for you to try a few of these on a smaller scale. Smaller, maybe a department or someplace, where it could be a little more intimate. So we set up initially some with our operators because they're on different shifts, and some of these we never get to see. And we set it up with our maintenance staff, people who, are not really don't sit in front of a computer all day. And they were great. I mean, everyone we had, the attendance was up, the number of questions was up. So we got really good feedback. And again, these are people that we have a hard time communicating with. So it really showed, hey, there's something here. So now we've expanded that. We've reached out to some other groups, and we've got quite a number of stay-at-home groups that we're going to be reaching to. And now we're already starting to conceptualize more topic-specific discussions. How do we get more information out to people? I think there's a lot of opportunities there. And again, that's just one example. So video communication, different forms of communicating. We talked about maybe this newsletter, instead of being a text that people have to open, maybe it becomes just an audio one. So again, moving forward, I think there's a lot of opportunities for us to learn. So Jason, next one, please. Next slide, please. So, key message, it's all about the people. You can have the best policies and procedures in the world, but it doesn't matter unless you have dedicated, hardworking, engaged staff. And I think, to me, that is the key for us. That is what we have, and that's why our performance has been so good these first 100 days. Along that line, what I'd like to do is I would like to offer the opportunity to Kate Nyquist, our outreach coordinator, to just give you an example of some of the ways that we've been recognizing. So Kate.
Jason, go ahead and turn to the next slide. I want to thank the
Kate,
chair.
you're very quiet right now. Can you speak up a little bit, please?
Yes, I can. I usually never get asked to speak up, so that was a fun surprise. I want to thank the chair and committee members and Larry and Lisa for sharing this opportunity with me. Jason, I don't know if the slide was able to advance. One last slide for us. So one thing that we've been doing with a lot of success is some recognition feature articles. We started them in early April, really after we had, I think, a stretch of time with no safety incidents All of our plants were able to get their disinfection systems up and running early, and some of the plants were preparing for high water levels due to the springtime. And we just had kind of an excellent week, and we really wanted to share that. And ever since then, we've been running about 1 to 2 articles per week that showcase ES staff's dedication or creativity, and also how well prepared a lot of our groups were to take on some of the unpredictable challenges presented by COVID-19. So the way that we have been doing this, sometimes it's kind of word of mouth. A manager or someone will say, hey, I saw this great example of someone who really went above and beyond, or have you talked, this work group really did something new or creative. And then ES communication staff, so that's Tim O'Donnell, Deb McKinley, Bobby Chong, and myself, with guidance from our incident command PIO, Karen Neese, partner with the manager of that group to craft these articles. And it turns out that managers are incredibly excited to have their staff featured. They get really into it. They send us a lot of pictures. They send us a lot of quotes. They talk to their staff, what do you want to see in an article? And really importantly to them and to us, the communication staff, is that they maintain a lot of editorial control. And so we always make sure that they and their staff are comfortable with the article. Some people don't want to be called out by name or individually. They want it to be a team article. And so we adjust that a little bit to really fit the different cultures of the groups that we have, but also to highlight all the great work that's been happening in ES. And I think overall, it's been a really huge learning opportunity for a lot of staff. I'm pretty new to the council. I started in December, and there are a lot of groups I didn't know about. And so I think this has been such a fun way to learn about all the work the council does. But even some more seasoned staff members have said to me, like, I didn't know that they did that. And that's pretty cool. Or I didn't know they could do all of these things remotely. I think everyone was really impressed by what our process computing group has been able to accomplish in terms of redundancy in systems and making control rooms safe for our operators. So it's been really fun to share that with everybody and to sort of see other ES staff learn more about each other. It's given us a great sense of scope of the entire system, how many people are really involved, how many different groups are involved in this work. Again, as sort of a newer staff member, I will close up a work day and tell my husband or call my mom and be like, you wouldn't believe what people do, just to make sure that this works every day. And it's really exciting. And my non-COVID job is external communications, and I'm constantly thinking of ideas for we got to tell people about this. We got to tell more people about this. And it's also really highlighted how COVID-19 has changed how every single group in ES works, and yet our work is still getting done. We're maintaining excellent service to the region. And I was sharing with the team earlier last week that it's also kind of been a great reminder to all of us that wastewater collection and treatment has a huge social science component to it, that we are pipes and pumps, but also people, and we serve the needs of people in the region. And I think staff have really enjoyed getting to see the people behind all of these really big projects. So it's just one way that we have been highlighting ES staff and promoting what they're doing and celebrating their diverse ideas and their new approaches to things, and everyone kind of overcoming. And I think probably nobody outside ES knows, how much work is going into making us successful. This informational item is over, and Jason, you can go to the next slide and we will stand for any questions.
That's outstanding. Pipes, pumps, and people. I'm going to remember that one. That's great. And I definitely share your thoughts, Kate, about learning something new every single day. I have that sense too of oh my gosh, you wouldn't believe what I just heard this person does. It's really pretty cool. Any questions for Kate or Larry? Councilmember Zirin.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, just a couple reactions, and then I'll have a question here. I wouldn't, from my professional standpoint, Larry talked about, Mr. Rogacki talked about a 10 to 15% reduction in the accidents. I personally, I would expect that because now people are at a heightened sense of safety, not just falling down the steps, uh, but on everything. And that's a very good thing. And when we start talking about dedicated, hardworking, engaged staff, what we're talking about there is culture, and it's a positive culture. And I really that really comes through our presentations that the culture is it's encompassing, it's bringing people in, it's making sure that people are supported in their jobs, and that's a really important thing. We cannot I cannot say enough about that. But if Mr. Rogacki is still here, I have this great confidence that he can answer just about any question. He's still with us?
Yep, I'm still here.
I'm just wondering if the additional use of disinfectants has had any impact on the what is coming into the plants at this point. Has that changed kind of the chemistry of anything, or is it just so minuscule? I'll let you answer.
It's insignificant. When you think about the concentration and the number of organics and the pollutants in the raw wastewater that we treat, it probably breaks down some organic material because the disinfecting chemicals will oxidize that, but it's insignificant. It's not something we would ever be able to measure.
Excellent question. Any others? Well, thank you very much. We shall see. As you said, Larry, if we have to have a 200-day report or a 300-day report, hopefully not. But time will tell, I guess. And so thank you very much. Appreciate it. Lisa, anything else that you'd like to report at this time?
Just that I have been saying a lot lately, that I have gratitude and pride in our workforce beyond measure. It's just, they've really persisted through all the chaos that we've all experienced in our lives and shown up in such a great way and supported each other. In these tough times, there's been a lot of great camaraderie despite the fact that there's social distancing. So I think some of the things that we're going to take away from this pandemic is that even in tough times, we know communicating with each other is really a central thing. And that's a big part of inclusion. And we all know that we have work to do when it comes to being more inclusive as organizations and a society. So I think we're on a good place to do really good things with that, both in our organization and in our region as we do the next regional framework. I will mention today that we had several staff participate in a webinar on the efforts to increase our diversity and inclusion within environmental services. And it was a sellout crowd. They didn't sell seats, but they were at capacity. And it is recorded, but I think it would be really good if we could bring staff and have that be an info item for you in the future, because it's really good for staff to hear directly from you and answer questions and to be able to kind of talk about what they feel passionate about, having been a part of making happen. So if you're up for that, I will get that at a future info item in an upcoming Environment Committee meeting.
I would second that. Lisa, as you know, I attended that meeting or that webinar this afternoon, and it was put on by the EPA, and they highlighted two areas. One, a small wastewater plant in Maine. I think they have like 4 million gallons a day at their wastewater treatment plant, relatively small. City, yeah, nothing. It's like nothing. That's like 3 minutes at Metro, maybe. But then yeah, like, oh my gosh, we must have had pretty darn close to what, 8 to 10 of our employees participated in this webinar. And the title of it was Utility Workforce Diversity. And I was floored. I mean, when I said a minute ago about something along the lines of you wouldn't believe what people do, learning something new every single day. I was thinking about this webinar that I was listening to, and so I asked Liz Sun to distribute it to the entire council, but yeah, I think it would make a lot of sense to revisit that for our committee. One of the highlights, and there were a lot of highlights, was a young woman by the name of Sudi Hashi, I believe is how you pronounce it. And her title is Assistant Outreach Coordinator. And she did a great job. And what made it a highlight is that she was part of the Urban Scholars internship program. So you recall, I think it was last summer when all of the urban scholars came to the full council meeting, and each one made a couple-minute presentation. So she was one of those scholars from some recent year, and she was outstanding. And we had someone who's completing an apprenticeship make a presentation. So it was everybody from people starting their careers to managers to senior leaders, and it was fantastic. So yeah, full steam ahead on that one, Lisa. I support that 100%. Very good. Anything else on your end of things, Lisa?
That's the extent of what I plan to cover tonight on the general manager's report.
Excellent. If there's nothing else, we are adjourned.